Liz Hamburg was raised in the U.S. and graduated from Brown, but she started her career in Japan and then Russia before earning her MBA and founding several companies in the U.S. She's founder and CEO of Candoo Tech, which provides remote technical support and training for older adults, keeping them safe, independent, and connected. The American Medical Association recently declared digital access to be a social determinant of health, opening the door for Candoo to offer its expertise to Medicare Advantage members, whose plans can justify the expense with improved star ratings. Liz spent a decade as a radio co-host with her mom on WOR Radio in New York, which means she's probably overqualified to be on this podcast. But in any case, it was a real pleasure to interview her. I'm David Williams, host of the HealthBiz podcast and president of Health Business Group, a strategy consulting firm that helps companies like Candoo Tech develop robust growth plans. Contact me, dwilliams@healthbusinessgroup.com, to discuss strategy for your company. And while you're at it, please subscribe to the HealthBiz podcast on your favorite service. Well, Candoo Tech founder and CEO Liz Hamburg, welcome to the HealthBiz podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Liz, it is fascinating to see what you are doing now, but I have to say, at least as fascinating in just looking through your background, places you've been, things you do, languages you speak. And so we're going to spend a little bit of time on that journey, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Well, I always say I do speak a lot of languages. I studied Japanese in college and did some of my junior year there, and I studied Spanish and Italian and spent some time living in Russia. But I will say that the language of healthcare is probably the hardest language I've ever had to learn. So.
That's a tough one. I'm not sure if anybody speaks it fluently. So
it is definitely one of the more challenging languages that I've had to learn. But yeah, I've started my career. I've been an entrepreneur for many, many years. It's sort of embarrassing to say how many at this point, but really started my career working for a Japanese media company. And I was based in New York, but going back and forth to Tokyo. And it was sort of like what we call the Time Warner of Japan at the time. And They were one of the first licensees of Nintendo back in the day when no one had ever heard of Nintendo and video games were just kind of starting in the US. So I helped them to launch their first video game business. And I was never a business person. I was interested in media and communications and journalism. And really, I got hooked. It was just so exciting and fun to start something from scratch and have to think about the marketing of it and the branding of it and the distribution of it. And we went to CES for the first time, Consumer Electronics Show. And so from that, I really got hooked on starting businesses. I went back to business school. I went to Kellogg out at Northwestern in Chicago, Evanston, and then from then on I've been doing startups. So everything from some of the early stage, what's called ed tech, educational technology companies, where we partnered to Kaplan. And my most exciting adventure was being part of a cell phone operator, being part of the founding management team of a cell phone company that was based in Moscow back in the day when things were just changing. And really it was some of the first private equity money going in there, and we ended up growing it and taking it public on the New York Stock Exchange. So that was kind of a wild ride.
No, that's fascinating. So let me just wind back to Japan for a minute, because there's a lot of people who study Japanese in college, and if they go to Japan, they usually go and teach English or something like that. But you were going back and forth on the video game path. I mean, how did you actually get that job in the first place?
It was interesting. I'd spent part of my junior year living there and working, like many of us, teaching English and so on. And I went to Brown University and studied a little bit of Japanese there. And there was a job posting at the time. It was, as I said, a Japanese media company that was looking for Americans to work in New York. I was from New York and wanted to be back in New York. And they needed to speak a little bit of Japanese, and it was kind of an entry-level job. And so there were a bunch of us Americans. We've all stayed in touch over the years who were there. There were three of us they used to call Charlie's Angels, because two of us were 5'10", and the other one had bright red curly hair. They didn't know what to make of us, and we all spoke Japanese. And we sort of stuck together. And at the time, we had bosses that didn't really speak English, and they weren't particularly interested in working in the U.S. So at the tender age of 21 years old, they were like, here you go, go do these deals. And so we really had this incredible adventure and incredible opportunity.
That sounds good. Well, your bosses probably had as much of an interesting experience as you did, being exposed to something unusual that they hadn't really come across before.
They absolutely did. Yeah.
So talk a little bit about some of the other things. I noticed you actually, I'm just a podcaster, but you're actually like on a big career in radio. So what was that like?
Well, I grew up around radio. My mother had a show on WOR Radio for many, many years. If any of your listeners used to listen in the New York area with Rambling with Gambling, and she had a show called the Joan Hamburg Show, and then she eventually moved to ABC Radio, where she still is. And when I got back from my stints living abroad and working out of New York, I was, as I said, a native New Yorker, but kind of new with fresh eyes in the city. Single I think at the time in my late 20s. And so I started going out and about and doing a series with her called New York Uncovered, sort of all my discoveries and adventures of New York. And then we started getting questions because the audience had kind of grown up with me and knew that I had done entrepreneurial things and I had had all these adventures. And so they started calling in asking about how to start businesses. And so we started a different segment called Launchpad on entrepreneurs and small business. And it was one of the early shows really interviewing everyone from the original founder of Spanx to, people making cookies in their kitchen. And it was really a terrific show that was inspiring lots of other entrepreneurs. So we did that for about 10 years together.
That's a nice thing to be able to do with your mom. Most people are lucky if they get to have lunch with her. So.
Yeah, well, she kept saying I wouldn't answer her call waiting, so that was the only way she got to actually see me once a week.
That sounds about right. So, as you mentioned, you've started a number of businesses. There's also some that you've done in the nonprofit space. Tell us about the Taproot Foundation.
Yeah, absolutely. I've always been on boards and wanted to give back, and so when I left my last company, I really wanted to do something that was in the nonprofit and social impact space, and so Taproot Foundation is a wonderful organization. It's a national nonprofit. It was started by a founder, and I followed that founder and became the CEO. And we were connecting skilled volunteers to other nonprofits. So, so many nonprofits don't have the resources that they need, and so they really rely on volunteers. And this was what we call skilled volunteers or pro bono. So it was all non-legal pro bono. So we worked with a lot of companies. We worked with volunteers around the country. And this was sort of tying into what I'm doing now, because when I came in, Taproot was doing about 200 projects a year, and I helped them build an online matching platform where we ended up, when I left, with about 35,000 volunteers. And in fact, the team that helped me build that platform is now with me today at Candoo Tech.
Great. Well, that's a great segue into talking about Candoo Tech. I love the name. First of all, it sounds like, of course, like can do, but also I guess the first thing that came to my mind, and maybe it's because we're recording this during the winter, is it sounds like a snowmobile as well. So Candoo Tech, what's this, like Ski-Doo, So that's the...
I never heard snowmobile, but it really was the idea of like, you can do it and we can help. And so it was really all about empowering, and you always hear, especially from older adults, but many of us who are, technophobes, that, oh my God, I can't do it. It's too complicated. I'm too stupid. I don't understand it. I'm too old to learn. And so we kept saying, no, you can do it. You can do it. And then someone said, well, let's just call it Candoo Tech. And so that was really how it came about. And it started really from a very personal inspiration. My dad, who passed away a couple of years ago at almost 90, but he literally lived next door to Best Buy.
Yeah.
And he was the first guy in line for every gadget you can imagine. In fact, when he passed away, there were, piles of old Kindles and iPads, and he would buy everything, and he never knew how anything worked. And so, he had Geek Squad on speed dial, and he was constantly at the Apple store, talking to the geniuses. But as he got older, he had, so many people, who get to be that age, had macular degeneration. He wore hearing aids. He was hard of hearing. In the end, he had some cognitive decline and some mobility issues. And so, the traditional support just wasn't cutting it for him. And it culminated one day. I don't know if you listened to the voicemail on my website, but he left a voicemail which was real, and he said Alexia. He called her Alexia.
Yeah.
He said Alexia's gone out of town. He's like, I don't know where to find her. I don't know what to do. I've tried her 5 times. Call me back. And so he was kind of joking, but he really wasn't, because he really needed to ask Alexa something. She really wasn't responding, and he wasn't going to pay Geek Squad to have someone come over and figure it out. And it was just a quick question, but he was so frustrated. And so that's when the light bulb went off for me to say, there's got to be a better way, and we've got to have something that's a reliable, affordable, accessible way for older adults to feel comfortable with their technology.
Yeah, it's a really interesting concept. I'm thinking about you're mentioning your dad, didn't know how things worked. There's a lot of just assumption that people that are older don't understand technology or don't use it and so on. But interestingly, I find that some of the older people that maybe were involved in the early days, maybe they programmed a mainframe or had some early exposure, maybe actually understand a little bit fundamentally at some of the lower levels, some of how things actually work. And some people who are younger and facile using TikTok, Facebook, or not necessarily Facebook, but some other kinds of things, they don't actually understand how a computer works. And
exactly.
So there's sometimes inverse correlation between age and understanding. And then the other thing is that if you consider, you mentioned macular degeneration, which of course makes it harder for people to be able to see, the people that can actually most benefit in a profound way from the technology are often older people, right? It might be fun for a young person to do like a crazy zooming
Absolutely.
thing in, but the older people could actually benefit from it. So you just brought up a couple of very interesting ideas.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. And that's why we're so excited to start working with the health plans. And what I was really, really excited to see, I don't know if you heard this, but just recently the AMA, American Medical Association, deemed digital access as a social determinant of health. It was interesting to me because, we traditionally think about, obviously, social isolation, is one of the top ones, access to healthcare, access to food, access to transportation. But what one of the reasons I started Candoo Tech, and it's a for-profit, but it's a public benefit corp, so we have social impact goals. And one of my original goals was to say, how can we use technology to improve the lives of older adults? And that was pre-pandemic. So, we've really seen a very, very big impact, but we also are very happy in a way, even though it's a bad situation, but happy that AMA is acknowledging that digital access is a barrier. And so, what we found is it's not enough to just say, yeah, we're going to put broadband, in all of America, or it's not enough to say we're going to hand everyone a tablet. But if you don't show people how to use it, no matter what age, but especially older adults, if you don't show them how to use it and then have someone there to support them, frankly, it's what we call, a very expensive paperweight.
Now, was there any sort of, I just wonder what the debate was like, and I don't know if you're privy to it, in declaring digital health access social determinant. Was that sort of universally acclaimed once people hear about it, or is that controversial, do you think?
It's a great question. I wish I was behind those closed doors. I don't think it's controversial at all. But, I think the real question is, how is it going to be, what is the result of that? Because I think everyone acknowledges there is a digital divide, and the question is, who is going to fund this? And so that's really been, my soapbox is to say the Medicare Advantage, plans are starting to acknowledge, and again, there certainly is money for broadband access and for tablets, but really, I want people to think about what digital access means, and it's more than just the hardware and the broadband.
Right. No, interesting. So, you talked about the original inspiration for the company, and clearly you'd had a lot of experience leading up to its founding. How have things evolved since you kicked off?
Yeah, well, we started pre-pandemic, so they've evolved quite a bit. We were working in the New York area. My original hypothesis was you had to be in person, sitting next to someone, holding their hand and, showing them and literally pushing buttons and pointing them from place to place. And that was going along really well. But we stopped all that in pretty much in March, April of 2020. And we started experimenting with remote access. And I was originally quite skeptical, to be honest. I thought, this is never going to work. And this population, you need to be by their side. But I'm really happy to say that it's worked really, really well. So we're now completely nationwide, and we went from mostly serving, a direct-to-consumer business to now mostly working with enterprises. So we are partnering with senior living facilities, we're partnering with government agencies, with social service agencies, and then of course now with the health plans to really, again, bring this digital access and bring this digital literacy to this population.
It's very interesting what you say, because I see on your website now there's a banner, I think, that says everything is done remotely. But when you consider how do you reach people and how do you scale, it's one thing when you have to be in person, but then when you can't be in person, then all of a sudden you figure out a way to do it otherwise. And then your assumptions about, how you're going to roll out and scale up really change, it sounds like, in your case.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's been great is we're working with everyone from, very urban environments to very rural environments. We have clients who are in very rural areas of Missouri and Ohio where they don't even have broadband access. Everything is a cellular data enabled tablet. Maybe they see someone who drops off food once a week. And so this is like their lifeline. We give them a tablet, teach them how to use that tablet. And then that's really, opening up a world to them where all of a sudden they can do virtual senior center activities. They can get onto telemedicine visits. They can communicate with their friends and family where they were completely cut off, again, especially during the pandemic. But I think that we have to acknowledge that hopefully we're somewhere, I wouldn't say at the tail end, but maybe, down another wave of the pandemic. But, that this digital access and kind of window to the world is not going away.
When the pandemic started up, you had people that had, and I'll put my mother in this category, people that never really thought about, using Zoom or anything like that. All of a sudden they started to use it out of necessity. Now, one thing that I think we have to give credit to older people for is that, they recognize the value of in-person. Sometimes they'll see the kids or the grandkids who, they're on their machine and they don't recognize the benefit of doing things in person. But there is something on the other side too, which is, hey, there's a lot that you can do digitally. And then, as you say, once they have kind of enabled, then they feel capable and they can do other things that allow older people to be less isolated and more able to participate.
Well, and again, we don't see it as an either or. We want people to get back in person. We want to get back to our lives. Social isolation, we know, has significant health risks. So, we never want everyone to just be on their devices. That's not good for anyone. But at the same time, we also know that technology is here to stay. We had a client who wanted to reorder her stationery. And, she would walk into the stationery store and talk to the retail person, and she would order her, personalized stationery, and that was it. Now she has to do it online, and she was lost, so the real question is, how do you make sure that people can get what they need to get done, whether that's ordering groceries, watching movies, and also be able to, go out and enjoy each other in person.
Now, you mentioned the language of healthcare being difficult. One of the nice things about Social Determinants of Health is it's sort of, you're not quite in the healthcare realm, but I think maybe you also get a little bit closer. Are there things like telehealth that you're involved with? Like how close do you get to the big bad healthcare world itself?
Well, we get pretty close because we are working now with the Medicare plan, with Medicare Advantage plans. Yeah. And so, definitely looking at those and how do we help improve star ratings and how do we, improve access to healthcare. We do, obviously, we are very, very careful and conscious of security and safety. So we don't do things like save people's passwords or, go into their bank accounts, but we do help them when they need to install an app to access their health insurance or to access a telemedicine visit. We're there to help them download that app, learn how to use it, reset passwords. So we're very much involved in the world of getting them comfortable with their technology around healthcare.
You mentioned about helping the plans with their star ratings, and of course the Medicare Advantage plans get paid more if they get higher ratings, and it's just fundamental to their business models. What are the ways that you help, and is your ability to influence the star ratings going up, going down, staying the same?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, we're just in the process of rolling out with our first health plan, which we will be announcing very shortly. Great. So we can let you be one of the first to know about it. It's in the New York area. So I can't comment on the impact on the star ratings yet, but we do believe that they will have a significant impact. We've been doing surveying of our users, and our what's called CSAT score, our customer satisfaction score, is between 96 and 99%. So Great. We definitely have seen, strong satisfaction on our ratings, and we also have been doing impact studies on if our clients can get onto things like telemedicine, has it improved their ability to engage and connect with family and friends? Has it been able to improve their access to healthcare? Has it been able to improve their ability to research medical conditions? And so all of those are really pointing trends in the right direction. So, I think if I come back on in 6 months,
Yeah.
I'll be able to answer that question, hopefully positively on the star ratings.
That sounds good. I know that, the just the direct level of satisfaction has become more important for the star ratings. And so to the extent that you can help to solve people's frustrations that they have with life and have the health plan be part of that, it should be helpful. So.
Absolutely. And the other thing is just engagement. So what we've seen a lot of is how do you increase and improve engagement? And if you're not able to even download the app that, all of the plans have spent so much time and money investing in and creating, then, it's really hard to measure and improve engagement. So from a very base level, making sure that a member can actually download the app and knows how to use it is, the most basic and fundamental thing that we can help them do.
Liz, you alluded to this a couple of minutes ago when you were talking about not storing passwords and so on, but I want to ask you about the risks that are out there and the threats from cyber attacks and scams and so on. Now, this affects everybody. I even though I actually work in cybersecurity, I have been a victim myself. Certainly, this happened to my parents. It happens throughout healthcare. What role do you play, if any, in helping older people to deal with the cyber threats that are out there?
Yeah, it is unfortunately a very real problem and continuing to grow. We do a couple of things. One is just from our staff and our security standpoint, all of our tech concierges, they're US based, they're W-2 employees, they're background checked, reference checked, and we record all calls for quality control. And if someone's on a shared screen, they can only get onto a shared screen with someone's permission. And, we're tracking when they log in and when they log off. So we're definitely monitoring for safety and security of our internal team. And then, we get calls all the time unfortunately, from clients who've said, oh, someone called and said, they were Microsoft and I let them into my computer.
Yeah.
So we do a lot around education. We do a lot of group lessons, blogs, information on how to stay safe and secure online. And then we also tell them, look, if you ever get a phone call and you're not sure about it, call Candoo, because we become the trusted resource and we're able to really vet, sometimes, that like right click on an email and see if it's a real email. So we're able to check things on their behalf. And unfortunately, then when they do get scammed, which it happens, we have a protocol to go through where we can make sure that we clear out any malware and kind of advise them on how to clean and check their machines.
Liz, you mentioned when you started the company, it was based on some insights, some coming from your father about what's possible for older people, what they need, and so on. What have you learned on the way maybe that surprised you, that you wouldn't have expected going in?
Yeah, it's interesting. We've been over the last couple of years been consulting with experts. So we now have teams of geriatric specialists and audiologists and cognitive enrichment specialists and vision impairment specialists. So we're constantly really learning of what are best practices and what are some things that we can share to really improve the lives of people with accessibility needs. And so that's been an exciting development on our side in one way that we're really quite different from, your typical tech guy or from Geek Squad.
Yeah.
I think for me, I'm not surprised because I know how powerful people can feel and how empowered, but it's been really amazing to see that people who've had no experience at all with technology, our oldest was 105.
Yeah.
But, a lot of people who literally who've been on a flip phone or never had technology at all, never had, broadband connection at home, are able to really, with a couple of hours of training, even remote training, can feel really empowered by their technology. And so that's been really a fantastic and beautiful thing to see.
You kind of answered this before in terms of where do you go from here, because it sounds like you're just starting in with Medicare Advantage, which is, I think, probably what's going to drive you forward. But any other thoughts on kind of where you take the company from here?
Yeah, again, we see healthcare as a really, really interesting and important place to go. So that is, definitely the direction we're moving in. We're continuing to work with senior living facilities and then, with government agencies as well. So, we also fundamentally, we are a tech company. So I'm also really excited about, the data that we're collecting, obviously all, anonymized data, but really being able to look at the trends of what are the questions people are asking, where are they getting stuck, being able to advise both hardware and software providers on how to improve their own technology, and being able to make our services a lot more efficient as we're starting to learn and gather that data and figure out how we can be most helpful.
Great. So the final question is a question that I ask all my guests, although I'll add a little twist to it for you, and that's about any books that you're reading and anything you recommend. And I'll also just ask, what language is the book in before we specify that for anybody else. But
English.
Okay.
A couple of things. I'm a big fiction reader because I, need to sort of turn my brain off and just do something fun at the end of the day. So a couple of things. On the fiction side, I'm reading something that an old friend and former classmate of mine from Brown just came out. She was a wedding planner and a caterer, and she has become a best-selling author. And the name of her new book, and I have to look because it's so funny when I read on the Kindle now, so I never remember the names of any books.
You put the cover, you put it down, and if you're like me, it has the ads on it, so you just see whatever they're advertising, and not your book.
Yeah. But her book is called Olga Dies Dreaming by Xochitl Gonzalez, and it actually hit a couple of bestseller lists. So I'm really proud of her for making a big career change. And on the business side, I've been reading, and we just have initiated on our team something called OKRs. I don't know if you follow those, but
Nope.
Objectives and Key Results. So there's a book called Measure What Matters by John Doerr. He's a big venture capitalist who's one of the early investors in Google. And it's all about how do you set goals for the team, and how do you look at objectives and sprints and things like that. So that my team has really started taking that to heart, and it's been kind of a game changer in the way that we set goals and hold each other accountable.
Well, great. Well, Liz Hamburg, founder and CEO of Candoo Tech, and many other things, thanks so much for joining me today on the HealthBiz podcast.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure, and I hope I can come back and report on those improved star ratings in a couple of months.
Absolutely. You've been listening to the HealthBiz podcast with me, David Williams, president of Health Business Group. I conduct in-depth interviews with leaders in healthcare business and policy. If you like what you hear, go ahead and subscribe on your favorite service. While you're at it, go ahead and subscribe on your second and third favorite services as well. There's more good stuff to come, and you won't want to miss an episode. If your organization is seeking strategy consulting services in healthcare, check out our website, healthbusinessgroup.com.